Working on your live stream. All right. That's we we are live.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, so we were talking about astronauts and
Other
some other
things.
occupation which we shall not mention as this is a family show. Apparently, there are quite a few Jim Bensons out there. I did not know.
I am not as unique as I think I am.
Yes. I had no idea. All right. So, and I'm fighting here with Streamlabs, So but we were I see we're talking live about on YouTube, so that's what astronauts and matters.
Okay. Other
Some other
things. Really
occupation
cool.
which we. All right. Cool. So, Jim, while we're waiting, still 2 minutes before the rest of the audience starts streaming in, what are you up to these days? What are you being excited and focusing on?
Well, so a couple things are happening. One is at Modus Institute, our online school. We've launched a bunch of events. So we have a couple of book clubs, some lean coffees, and then some mini classes that have kind of taken off. And it's nice because, like you and I were talking about a few minutes ago, being social is still at a premium. We would like to be more social. And
Indeed.
so this is giving me all sorts of opportunities to talk to people all over the world, several times a week, actually, and that's a lot of fun. The second thing
Like
that
today, right?
like today, like right now, talking to you and delving into to the product owner idea.
And 15 other people at the moment, but more streaming in.
Okay. Well, so those 15 other people will also learn that on May 1st, for the first time since 1999, I will release an album. And for the first time since 1983, that will actually be on vinyl.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's kind of a COVID project of mine. Was I had I delved back into being a musician because it's really hard to be a musician when you're traveling around the world constantly. But when COVID put a stop to that, I picked up all the instruments and started learning how to play them again. And it probably will not win a Grammy, but it's definitely a milestone for me. And
Absolutely.
then the last bit, because things are kind of exciting right now, is that there are in the collaboration equation book. I talk about a thing called a right environment exercise. It's a precursor to being a lean or an agile team. It's like, how does your team build its own culture of continuous improvement? And new clients are showing up and wanting to do right environment exercises with us. And some of those are live and some of them are online. So it's a nice mix of not having to travel, but then being able to travel too. So it's not like before where like in order to make a dime, I had to leave the house. But now it's I can pick and choose and do the best of
So
all
I
worlds.
think we have a topic that we can actually dive into. But before we do, everybody that is watching, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. We are starting our keynote with Jim Benson in a very relaxed atmosphere, as it fits with a musician in the room, of course. Maybe he'll move out of his chair and go and pick up a cigar on the other side and come back with a cup of coffee or whatever
Strong.
it is that musicians drink. I have no idea. Anyway, Jim's been on my Agile universe since the beginning of my Agile career. Of course, everybody knows him as our founder on Twitter. That's where I met Jim for the first time. And somebody on the chat already said there are many people named Jim Benson, but there's only one, the Jim Benson. Very well said, Rick.
Aw.
Very well said. He's also a lover of culinary delights. And I remember that when I was in Seattle, we met at a restaurant where I ate for the first time in my life kimchi, which was an
Mm-hmm.
experience in itself. And Jim is also the author of Personal Kanban, a seminal book for many of us who started Agile way back in the early 2000s and late 90s. And he
Hmm.
just published a book recently called The Collaboration Equation, where he explains what that right environment exercise is all about. We're going to talk about that today a lot. Jim, welcome.
It is good to be here. Hi, everybody.
Absolutely. It's awesome to be here. Awesome to be here with Jim and all of you friends out there. Just hop into the chat and let us know, where are you located? I know that somebody already said that they are from Germany. AT, hello, Germany. Uh, Alex just joined. He's from Brazil. Hey, Alex, welcome.
Hello, Alex.
Oh, maybe we'll get Jim's singing voice.
That's right.
All
You
right,
don't
but
want,
if you're
you wouldn't
interested
like
in
me
the
when I'm
topics
singing.
of product ownership, do check out productownersummit.org. There's a lot more over there that you can explore. But Jim, let's dive right into the topic. And I have a feeling we're going to talk about the collaboration equation book quite a bit here, since the
Yeah.
product owner role is, at its essence, a collaboration catalyst role. So hopefully we'll
Hmm.
dive more into that. But let's first describe a little bit the universe of the topic. And of course, the topic is how to succeed as a
Hmm.
product owner. So let's dive into some anti-patterns that you've seen in real life affecting the PO role. What are some of those that spring to mind right away?
Oh, wow. That's there are so many, it's hard to pick. But they all center around one thing, and that's a lack of definition about what the product owner role is. So I've never been in two companies where a product owner is defined the same way. There's no set definition, and that's okay because you do want it to be flexible, but you do actually internally want to have you want to know what people expect of you, and you want to know what you're expected to deliver to them. And that ends up not being the case for most product owners. They live in kind of like this murky world of, am I a product manager? Am I a scheduler? Am I an estimator? Am I actually the project manager? Am I the or am I just hired to fill a role that an agile team is supposed to have, and I actually don't do anything at all? Which I see a hell of a lot. So I've been in many organizations where if you ask the product owners what they do, they can't tell you. And individually they can say what they do on a daily basis, but they can't say what their goals are. And that for me is the biggest anti-pattern. It's just an overall lack of clarity. Um, the
And of course,
second
that's
large,
going to affect immensely the
Mhm.
collaboration with the team and stakeholders.
Well, yeah, because you can only collaborate when you have something to collaborate on. And if you don't know what you're supposed to do, then fundamentally you actually don't know what you can't, as the book says, you can't act with confidence because you don't know what is expected of you and what you're supposed to expect of other people. So when we go through a collaborative exercise with a team, and also this is another anti-pattern, teams will call us in and say, we want to figure out what our culture is. And then like the scrum master and the product owner and the product manager, and those people won't show up because they want to be servant leaders and let the teams work. And they don't seem to recognize that they are team members. And the number of times I've had to chase people down in buildings and say, you need to come to this meeting. And they're like, well, I'm busy all day. It's like, we're talking about what your team does on a daily basis. And part of that is you, because you are part of the team. And so understanding that a product owner isn't a manager, that a scrum master isn't a manager, but they're all part of the team. They might have managerial functions, but if you're not there on a daily basis talking to the team about what they're doing, then that is a definite anti-pattern. Protecting the team is a definite anti-pattern. So I run into a lot of product owners that like go to meetings so that they can be the voice of the customer. Voice of the customer to me is an anti-pattern,
So,
which
so let's drive that a little bit further. Of course, you
I
wrote the
thought you might want
collaboration.
to.
Uh, You wrote the collaboration equation, and
Hmm.
of course, as the name says, it's all about collaboration. And the product owner role is a key role in that aspect when we are trying to develop software together. The
Hmm.
product owner is a key role when it comes to collaboration. So let's take that further and talk about one of the aspects that you mentioned in your intro, which was this idea that the product owner is a team member. Now that's very easy
Hmm.
to say, but we need to make it concrete. So for Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, and also product owners out there listening to us, describe
Hmm.
for us what you mean in terms of collaboration when you say that the product owner is a team member.
Right. So everyone that works in a company makes decisions on a daily basis, and those decisions require information. And if you get good information, you make better decisions. If you make decisions collaboratively based on good information, you make much better decisions. If you make decisions based on what one person tells you, or maybe some information that you managed to glean from somewhere, then you're going to make really crappy decisions. And those decisions result in technical debt. They result in 737s falling out of the sky. So in order to make good product, people have to know what they're building and why. So what I loved about everyone having to leave the office and going to work from home is that developers worldwide, this was like really cool to watch, like worldwide, it did not matter where they were, even if before COVID they were remote. uh, Something happened where almost everybody said, you know what? There used to be the planning part of the value stream, and then there was our doing part of the value stream, and then there was the testing part of the value stream. Those walls, silos, started to break down. And so coders started to say, I don't understand what I'm building. Can I understand the why, please? So then they started to do more things back in the planning phase, which meant they built software right the first time because they were actually informed. The product owner at that point becomes a real team member because the product owner's goal is to kind of sit above the daily coding, kind of watch how everything's happening, at the same time watching the market, watching the customer, watching the other teams, and saying, okay, so here's some things we got to know. So when we're planning this next sprint, there are 3 other teams that need stuff from us over the next sprint. We need to plan for that. No more dependencies. I would like to outlaw the word dependency. Every dependency you have that's a surprise is a fail. Okay. A dependency is only when work doesn't match the structure of your company. So your arbitrary structure is the problem, not the fact that another team needs information from you. So the product owner then becomes kind of like this relationship manager. But the moment that the product owner learns that team A is going to need something from us, we need to talk to team A along with the product owner to make sure that we get the right work done first. No more vague user stories and things like that, but we need to actually plan our work, like professionals. So previously, what would happen is the product owner would go off and have those conversations. They'd write up a bunch of user stories and they kind of feed that into the things that the team would need. But the team hadn't actually gone and talked directly with the customer, which in this case is team A.
One of the things that you alluded to is this idea of product owner becoming almost like uh, a relation. You called it a relationship manager. I was going to
Yeah.
say a PR agent for the team, but not just that. Also because they are an information gatherer, right? Like they're listening
Mm-hmm.
to the market, to the customer, to the other teams. And
Mm-hmm.
you talked about this relationship manager aspect in the context of dependencies. Now, I'm going to play
Mm-hmm.
devil's advocate here and hopefully verbalize what the majority of our listeners are thinking. Wait a minute, but
Or a
dependencies are
critical
just so
minority.
normal in a large organization, right? It's like, what do you mean dependencies come from the structure of the company not matching the work that we need to do? And how can the PO help?
Yeah. So what happens now is most dependencies arrive as surprises. Almost all of them arrive as surprises, or they arrive without an adequate understanding of the need of the other team. So quite frequently, and we all know this because sometimes we're the ones generating the dependencies for someone else. So there's the old, the dichotomy of the bastards and idiots. When somebody else brings a dependency to you, they're a bastard, and when they won't do your dependency, they're an idiot. Uh, so we know that the company has a need, but we don't know the level of urgency. We don't know the level of complexity, and we don't even know if their request for us has been well thought out, or if it is just it's a solutioning effort on their part. So we don't understand the problem it's trying to solve. We don't understand the best way for us to complete that work. So the only way for us to complete that work at that point is to do it in the most expedient way possible, which means fast, lots of technical debt, crappy, here's your burger kind of thing. Um, if the if we have a system in the company that is collaborative, where like all of the work of the company is being visualized, then we can see specifically by a variety of different visualizations work that's coming down the pipeline that is going to require the attention of different teams or different specialties. And then we do very simple things. We can like loan this person to that team for a couple of days. They do all the planning and the execution on this little bit of coding. Coding gets done, tested, and everything's fine. Something's bigger, the teams can actually merge for a short period of time and mob on the problems. Work comes through very regularly between different teams. Okay, then we can plan for that as actually just part of the regular throughput or the regular cycle of sprint work that comes through. But we don't do that. And it ends up the number of meetings that people have to complain about work that we could have planned for so outweighs the time it would have taken to plan for that work that it boggles the mind. But then it also results in crappy work, which means that then we have to spend even more time going back and fixing it, which we're unlikely to do because it is a piece of technical debt that doesn't directly relate to our team. It's those other bastards and idiots on the other team.
So now you're kind of directing this conversation to one thing that I've always said that sounds quite obvious as you say it, but it's very hard to actually see it implemented, which is you can't manage what you can't see. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Learning to See is one of the books that we
Mm-hmm.
both know about when it comes to the A3 report
Yep.
and the A3
Thinking.
approach in
Yep.
the lean manufacturing system. But for product owners, they literally need to learn to see the work, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the work that comes to a product owner isn't coming just from the backlog. You already talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
listening to the market, listening to the customer, listening to other teams. And then once we start to see that work, we need to visualize it to communicate, right? Because the product
Yep.
owner is kind of a spoke in the wheel, kind of the center of the wheel, right? It
Mm-hmm.
has many connections to other parts of the organization. So how can we as product owners start to first understand the value and the impact of visualization, and then building the systems that allow us to
Mm-hmm.
create that collaboration that you were talking about?
So this is what's fascinating about the product owner or product manager role, and this is why it's fun to be one, and it's also why it's incredibly painful to be one. Is that as a product owner or product manager, you need to be creative, like thinking of new ways that the stuff that you are doing can help the customer, better ways that the stuff that you and your team are doing can integrate with other parts of the company to, again, help the customer. You're also part of a team, and this is the other problem is that you've got your team or your teams, but then you've got your other team, which is your team of product owners. So another anti-pattern that I see is that product owners identify with their silo, but not with the company as a whole, and therefore they become silo amplifiers. They protect their teams, as opposed to figuring out how, as a group of product owners, what do we think as a group would make some really killer, improvements to the system, or what can we build, what can we fix, what have you. So there's that a product owner is wearing many different hats at once, and it's hard to know which one to put on at any given time. uh when there's a few companies that I've worked with that have done this well, and there's one company that I'm working with right now that did this really horribly when we first started working together several years ago, and are now like taking massive steps to do this really well. And key to that was making sure that the product owners understood that they were a collaborative team for both the flow of work and for the creative direction of the company.
And
And
that
it's
flow of
beautiful to
work is
watch.
and that flow of work is actually something we very often don't talk about, right? Because if we just look at the definition of the product owner, he owns the product, and their
Mm-hmm.
main interface with the team and stakeholders is the product backlog. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, there's a lot that affects the team that has nothing to do with what is in the backlog, but rather how it comes into the backlog. A
Mm-hmm.
very clear example is the annual planning, right? Like where you have
Mm-hmm.
a once a year big investment planning where you get lots of people to perhaps now even travel all over the world to go and sit in a room for many hours and write down high level epics, and then they all
Mm-hmm.
just get dropped in the lap of the team, and then of course that takes zero consideration regarding the work that will be discovered during the
Mm-hmm.
year, right? Because of course at the beginning of the year you don't know what's going to happen during the year.
Exactly.
So we need to go back to that collaboration and also understand the role of the PO in managing the flow of work,
Mm-hmm.
both to the PO role or PO team, as well as
Mm-hmm.
to the development team and later on, because it's the whole value chain that needs to be considered when it comes to the flow of work. So how do you help product owners understand and then also get their head around what it means to be in charge of the flow of work, not just what work needs to be done?
Right, right. And so the way that we try and deal with the flow of work is essentially to automate that process. So whether you're doing sprints or not, you can still visualize your work, and you can still set up your work in a flow-based system, where you have a backlog, and that backlog in one way or another is dynamically and constantly reprioritized. And then every so often you're replenishing the work that you're going to do. So you can do that in Kanban method, you can do it in Scrum, you can do it in XP, it doesn't matter. So the flow of like planned work is easy to automate. The challenge comes in how does the organization as a whole, and you in particular, react to changes to what your plans are. So when you encounter either complexity in the work, like the work itself, like this particular coding ended up being more complex than we thought it was going to be, complexity in the combination of resources that need to come to bear on a specific thing. We need 8 different teams to collaborate on getting this done. That's going to create some organizational complexity. The market shifts. This year, in the EU and in Germany in particular, there have been several regulatory changes that radically changed the way that online companies handled billing. No one planned for that work, and no one knew until the work actually arrived what its level of complexity would be. So the product owner needs to be that person who has the authority, has the agency, has the ability to say to the company as a whole, we have discovered that something that we were going to do is going to be more complex than we thought it was. How are we going to react to that? That is the thing that actually changes our flow of work. Almost nothing else changes our flow of work like that does. So there's other things, we can change our minds or whatever, but We can also say that founders syndrome is complexity. So if you work in a startup and your founder shows up every 2 weeks and changes your direction, maybe a founder buys your company and fires half the people randomly and then doesn't clean the bathrooms. You'll run into weird complexity that you didn't expect. So the book covers this, but on Modus Institute we have a large certification called the Lean Agile Visual Management certification, and this is actually what we deal with in it. Is how do you deal with the unknown at work? So we deal with things in it like discrimination. Like what happens if someone says that your group is guilty of age discrimination? What do you do? And it's not because you're teaching about that, but you're teaching about like, I didn't expect this weird problem and here it is. And now how do we go about solving for that problem? So product owners need to be expert problem solvers, and almost none of them have taken any classes in A3 thinking or problem solving.
And okay, so
there was a lot there. I'm sorry.
This was a problem, or you were talking about problem solving, but of course now we're talking about the flow of work. So that means the ability to solve problems in terms of, okay, so this has changed, the plans have changed, what is needed is changed. How do we adapt to it? There is a question from the audience, which I think is important. So coming back to managing the flow of work, one of the aspects to that is being able to make decisions. You said that the PO needs to have the agency and the ability to bring problems to the company that need to be solved by the whole company. So starting the collaboration. But there's also the aspect of decision making for product owners in general. Now, one of the things that I hear a lot, and it's in the Scrum Guide, is that the product owner is the single decision maker. But now, when we talk about collaboration, and especially when we talk about working in a multi-team environment where there's a lot of people that can influence the decisions that we need to make, we need to be able to make decisions even when we don't necessarily have the ability to make that decision. So for example, if I'm a PO, I need to collaborate with other POs. Like I can't tell them what to do, but I need to build a collaborative decision-making process. So coming back to that idea, POs are all the time influenced and perhaps even nudged or pushed into making certain decisions. How can we as POs turn that push into more of a collaborative and maybe even generative and creative negotiation or collaboration with other stakeholders?
Okay. So nothing to me could be more antithetical to the agile ideal than to say that any person on a team was the single decision maker. Okay, so when someone is a single decision maker, they are a decision-making bottleneck. They are guaranteed to be underinformed, and they are guaranteed to have a limited perspective on what was actually possible. So every member of the team brings a different perspective, either professionally or because of their background, on the way things could be done. And they bring their own creativity to solving the problem. So if you are a product owner and you have taken solace or pride in being the single decision maker, that is a slippery slope. Putin is a single decision maker. That's not working well for anybody right now. So we want to make sure that when we have like real professionals on our teams, that we're making the most of having those real professionals on our teams. And the more decisions that the team makes with you, the more they know about their work, the more likely they are to complete it right the first time, the more likely they are to push back on work that actually isn't necessary. That's kind of a rant. So,
So how do we get out of that trap is the question.
How do we get out of that trap?
How do we as POs start to build effectively and maybe even deliberately a collaborative decision-making process?
Right. So the worst thing that we could do is just tell everybody, you have agency, you have psychological safety, start making decisions. So we actually do need a system of decision-making. Okay, we need a system that relieves the flow of work from this bottleneck of decision-making that we've created, from this bottleneck of information that we've created. And we want to make sure that we're doing this because we want to free the product owner up to do higher and better things than to make every decision or to be a gatekeeper for all of the information. So what we do is we go through a process, which is in the book, which is in the collaboration equation book. It's called a right environment exercise. A right environment is when you have a company or a team, preferably a company, where all the individuals there, all of the professionals, have the information and the capabilities to do a professional job at any time, what we call acting with confidence. And the event is like a 5-day event, and it goes through an initial kind of value stream mapping exercise so people understand the work. We have a very interactive and deep charter. We call it a charter, but basically what it is it's 4 exercises to get the team to identify what their culture is. And your culture is how the individuals on your team interact. So if you want to put that into agile parlance, this is the individuals and the action and the interactions that the individuals want to take. This is defining them. That definition is called a process. And they interact as you do, as we're doing right now through tools. Right now, we're all interacting through Zoom. Our individuals interacting could not happen without the processes and tools of this system. So individuals and interactions through, not over, processes and tools. So we figure out how the individuals on our teams want to interact. Then the third thing that we do is we do a communication plan where people figure out what information they need, what tools they're using now to communicate, how those are great or how they're terrible. And then we say, we actually identify, like, if you want to express this information, put it here. If you want to express this other information, put it here. So if I'm having a conversation with you on Slack, that's awesome. If we make a decision that should be recorded, there should be a findable place where that goes. So 3 days later, I'm on Slack again saying, where's that thing that we talked about? We take all that stuff and then we make a quick roadmap. And what we've done in 5 days is create an actual culture, collaborative culture of continuous improvement. Whew, I think that's the fastest I've ever said that. It's an awesome exercise. We've done it hundreds of times now in probably 25 different industries. Like it's crazy how many places we've taken this, and it has just been a glorious experience every time.
So we've done the right environment exercise. We've even defined some of the where do we record decisions, where do we have discussions, what type of decisions are recorded. But of course, the product owner role is still a key, maybe even linchpin
100%.
role in that process. So when
you
you
can't,
look at
no team can live without one.
so when you look at the
For
product
all
owner,
of the bitching that I've done over the last 15 years about product owners, and God knows there's been a lot, I will say categorically, no team can exist without a huddle or a stand-up meeting. No team can exist without visualizing their work, and no team can exist without a product owner or a product manager.
so
Straight up.
that product owner or product manager needs to have certain traits, certain qualities that you look for when it comes to not just collaboration, but even like just helping others understand why we decide these things, what we are doing and why we are doing those things. So what are the key traits or qualities you look for in a product owner? Let's say you're going through the right environment exercise, you're looking at the people around in that room for those 5 days, and you're definitely identifying who would be a good or not so good product owner. What would the great product owner have?
So and this is also true regardless of industry. This person needs to care. They need to give a damn. They need to show up and actually be thinking about the product, the people who are building the product, the people who are going to come along later and either support or build the product in the future, the people who are using the product or the service. They need to care. So if you you can't care about a product without caring about the people who are building the product. So the product owner has to care about things that we don't talk about very much, which is like onboarding. which is like, how does the team protect each other? Not how does the product owner protect the team, but like if someone on the team is being overworked, the product owner needs to make sure that the rest of the team notices and cares. And I've talked about this a lot lately, but quite often, a painful number of times, I have come into teams that think of themselves as perfectly agile or perfectly lean or perfectly Kanbanic, and they have their boards up, and you see that they've got a backlog and it's nicely tended, and they've got a couple of development queues, and they're working through just fine. And then you see this big mess, and then you see done, and there's a couple things in done, and the big mess is always QA and testing, and you can never get the developers to stop developing or to QA and test. So you have a visible, obvious bottleneck and no one cares. I would want 0% of the product owners in the world to tolerate that kind of behavior. To be watching for the people on the teams that you're working with, whether it's your team or teams that your teams are interacting with, and seeing who is being systematically mistreated and work to alleviate that personal bottleneck. That's going to be my number one trait every time. And everything else, almost everything else, is trainable.
So we
Empathy
need
is
we
a
need to
thing.
be able to visualize the work, right? Like that's a key skill. Whether it's with the help of the Scrum Master or not, that's of course a
Mm-hmm.
possibility. Scrum Masters and Agile coaches should be able to help the product owners to create
Yep.
visibility into the work, but we need to be able to visualize the work and to understand what the bottlenecks, what triggers the problems
Mm-hmm.
at the bottleneck, and then how to organize around it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
theory of constraints style, like understanding how do you elevate the bottleneck and so on. So tell us a little bit more about where would we start as product owners? Where would we start with this effort of specifically now talking about bottlenecks? Where would we start? Is it like in the Teams board that we start looking at and understanding what is going on? Is it talking to the people on the team? How would you get us started?
Well, so again, the way that I would start is by doing the right environment exercise. Because right now, the board, any board that you have before you've actually defined your culture, is talking about things that you think your board should be talking about. But you haven't gotten together and actually said, what information do we need and when do we need it? So the reason that Kanban routinely fails, and the reason that agile transformations routinely fail, and the reason that lean transformations routinely fail, is because we're visualizing stuff other people say is important, but not that the team has identified as important. So for me, the first step in doing any of this stuff is making sure that you and your team know who you are and how you have each other's backs. So bottlenecks for human beings are more difficult to spot. So if someone on your team has a death in the family, their capacity is reduced for a time. They're not all there. So long time ago, Tony Ann and I were working with a woman here at Modus, and she was like a total workaholic. She'd blow through a million tickets a day. Her father passed away, and she was a wreck. And we had to lower her WIP limit to one thing a day so that she was doing just enough to still feel like she was alive and in control of something, but that she had time to react to that. So my caution here is make sure that you're visualizing the right things. This is why using many of the online tools that are available to us now make us create inhumane or underpowered visualizations, because we can't put things like silly cat pictures on them. We can't put things in there like little notes saying, "Oh my God, this was like the greatest thing ever." We want the ability to be able to bring the human element into our visualizations. And It's funny because people will say, well, that's an American thing. Americans want that. It's like, you know what? I've worked on every continent and in, maybe close to 100 different countries now. And I've found that in every single country, people like to do a good job, they like to laugh, and they like other people. So people are like, oh, we're Germans, we're buttoned down. Germans have the silliest Kanbans in the world if you just let them. They go nuts. This is a global constant that if you allow the human beings to appear on your visualizations, they will let you know where the real bottlenecks are. It's the craziest thing. Yeah, I could go on for days about that, so I'm gonna stop.
So let's move on and start to focus on what are some of the strategies that we can use as either Scrum Masters and Agile coaches who are helping product owners or product owners ourselves. How can we move to create that collaborative culture that you've been talking about?
Weirdly enough, for product owners themselves, the first thing I would do is, and I do, is get them to get together with all of the other product owners and then challenge them to be a team. Because the moment that they do that, it takes you out of your initial assumpted role of this is how I relate to my team. And it puts you in a place where you're absolutely a team member. You can't say this is my team of other product owners. And it's like, if we all work together, like for real, we visualize all of our work together, we figure out where the dependencies are, we figure out where there are new opportunities, we see some complexities up front, then all of a sudden things start to click for people who have been trying to figure out how to plan work for a team, that maybe their job isn't planning work for the team after all. It's figuring out how to make successful product, which is what a successful product owner would do.
And that is where the key difference is, right? Like, because very often our product owners, I mean, even in many of the training classes out there, product owners are trained to be creators of tickets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the role is you just have to have a properly, neatly managed list of tickets somewhere for the team to pull from. But
I got bad news.
That what the essence of the role is.
Yeah. If that's your role, Chat GPT is coming for you.
And you are well.
AI
we have a
buddy.
session here on the summit about that, by the way. If you go to productownersummit.org, there's a session with Bruno and Fred on that.
It's going to eat you alive because you're totally automatable. But you're not totally automatable if you're a creative, thinking, emotive human being. Ain't no one going to automate that.
And I think that's the key, right? Like it's like turning from a work creator, right, or even work gardener, if we want to give it a better name. I used to call it backlog secretary. That was the term we used way back when. But turning into a catalyst for the team, using their knowledge, their ability to collect information, and of course their collaboration skills to help the team succeed in whatever it is that they are supposed to succeed at.
100%. If we can get product owners to be more interested in design thinking than in user story creation, we will have won. The big problem here is that this is an organizational issue with Agile, is that when you go to upper management and you say this person is the Scrum Master, this person is the product owner, and they hear product owner, they think, that's the creative person that's doing the stuff. That role is filled. And then they go off and play golf and have a good time thinking that everything's ready. But what actually is happening is you've got a bunch of people totally focused on how much work a team is going to do. And no one in the company is actually focused on the creative aspect of it. And then you build boring, terrible products. And then you get boring, terrible teams.
Indeed. And usually products that are over bloated with so many features that nobody can use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because your goal ends up becoming feature fetish and not stable platform design.
I like that phrase, feature fetish.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Jim, we're getting close to the end, but of course, we will put the link to the collaboration equation in the notes below the video, so everybody go there and check it out. But what other resource could be a video, a podcast, a blog, or another book you could recommend for us for product owners that want to get deeper into this perspective of understanding the flow of work, understanding the aspects and the infrastructure for
Mm.
collaboration with their teams, stakeholders, and customers?
So if and we might put a link to it too, but if you Google Jim Benson lean reading list, you will get a copy of Jim Benson's lean reading list with no books about lean. And so for every product owner in the world, you should obviously read the collaboration equation because it's awesome. And so keep reading like the industry books, but every product owner in the world should be reading books about psychology. You should be reading fiction. So Toni Morrison's books, Kurt Vonnegut books. I recommend like Kobo Abe's books. Uh, their fiction will give you systems. Every fiction story is a set of systems. And the moment that fiction becomes interesting is when like two or three or four more systems run into each other. That's how William Gibson writes books, is he'll like come up with three things that aren't related to each other and say, if I smash these together, what would this, you know, dystopian book look like? Everything's a dystopian book for him, but there you go. But if we are going to build empathy, we can't just read books by people telling us to have empathy. We have to read books showing us how empathy works. So the Jim Benson's lean reading list with no books about lean have psychology books, economics books, fiction books, etc. in there. I have my problem is like whenever I move, I've got to rent like a million trucks to just move my books. I hate Kindles. I love paper. But we need as people, we need as product owners to be people first. So please, if you have just read 10 books about Agile, please read at least one book that has anything that doesn't deal with Agile at all. Otherwise, you'll never be Agile. You'll never be
And we,
Agile if you just read books by Agile people.
and we'll put the Jim Benson's lean reading list link down below so people can go and check it out. Jim, we want to thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge and the lessons that you shared with our community today. Before we go, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
If you go to Modus Institute, MODUS Institute.net, you can join the community there for free, and I'm there every day. You can DM me and talk your butt off. I am the most accessible person on the internet. So just go there and you've got real-time chat and access to Jim Benson any time of the day. Now, Jim Benson might not be at his desk or he might be in a meeting, but I am super reachable. So please do reach out. I love talking about this stuff, and there's thousands of people in the community right now talking about this stuff. So come on in, jump in the pool. The water's fine.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, everybody who watched this keynote live, and for those of you watching the replay, thank you for watching as well. We won't see your questions, but of course you can join Modus Institute, as Jim just said, and ask him the questions. So thank you all for coming. Jim, one last word, parting word of advice for our viewers.
I can quote other people. Kurt Vonnegut would say, if I know one thing, it's that you've got to be kind. W. Edwards Deming would say, let's go make a better world. We have the ability, like as product owners, we have the ability to make people's lives better. both in the company and outside. And if we don't make the most of that opportunity, then we just don't make it better. So
Absolutely.
go help other people.
Make the world better. Thank you very
Mhm.
much, Jim.